Hi and welcome. I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of 3 congregations in Eastern Ontario. And thank you for joining. Today is January the 6th, Epiphany. And as you can see back there, the camels have arrived at the stable and the wise men. According to the Bible, the Magi, or the wise men, traveled from the east and they came first to Jerusalem and then to Bethlehem. They followed a star. So what was this star? And that's what we're going to look at this week. Bottom line of what the star was, we don't know. But that doesn't stop us from trying to prove what it was or that it was real. And well, we got a problem because we're not sure when Jesus was born. So actually what we're trying to do is we think this is the time frame when he was born. What could have been understood as a star, and that would help us pinpoint exactly when he was born. Does that sound like going around in a circle? A little bit. So we don't know what the star was, but there's lots of guesses. I'm just going to summarize some of those guesses. First, the whole story was made up. There was no star. Fair enough. That's a theory. Secondly, God created the star out of nothing. Poof, there's a star, the wise men follow it, and poof, the star disappears. Because it was a real miracle, we don't have any evidence for it. It wasn't around long enough. The problem with that is God doesn't generally work that way. When we think about a lot of the miracles that we find in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, is God takes what was there and does something with it. So when Jesus fed the 5,000, he started with fish and bread, loaves, and it multiplied and was enough to feed people. So creating something out of nothing, not a typical way that God works now, but it's still possible. So then if we look at all the sort of normal, natural laws, ways that could have been seen as a star or interpreted as a star, and we're sort of stuck, as I said, we don't know when Jesus was born, but let's say that time period, 10 BC to 0, somewhere around there. Well, first theory is comet. Comets were often seen as somehow predicting the future. So that would be a really great way for God to sort of call attention to the wise men, and they could even be following it. The problem is comets were omens of bad news. Comets are what you saw when a king died, not when a king was born. So probably not a comet. What about a meteor? A meteor shower. We've got lots of them and they're really bright. Maybe that could have explained it. Well, yes, but meteors tend to fall very fast. They're only visible for a few seconds, maybe a couple minutes. Yes, you might have a shower that goes on for a few days, but you don't have one meteor lasting in the sky. So probably not. What about a supernova? Well, that sounds pretty good. That's a star that's exploding and becoming really, really bright. And of course, after it's exploded for a while, it'll shrink and back and we won't see it. So that seems to be a really good possibility. But if it is a supernova, astronomers around the world should have seen it. And we have accounts of supernovas in ancient Chinese records, but not around the time we think Jesus was born. So probably not a supernova. And that takes us back to something a little more mundane, but possible in astrology, planetary conjunctions. And so we saw in December that Jupiter and Saturn, big planets, were close enough that for a couple of days they looked like they were one star. And then, of course, as they kept traveling, you could see them more. Very impressive sight, and also not common enough that people would say, oh, this is time for the annual conjunction. No, it doesn't happen every year. Sometimes it doesn't happen within a lifetime. Not for Jupiter and Saturn to come together. And then the astrology part, or predicting the future part, where did this take place? If it took place in a specific constellation, zodiac, countries were represented by the different signs. So one of the examples was there was a big planetary conjunction that took place in Aries, the ram. And Aries was seen as the constellation of Judea. So you can imagine these magi, these wise men, probably in Persia, and they're watching the stars for signs, trying to read the future, and they see Jupiter, this brilliant star, and they know that it's Jupiter, and that signifies birth of the king, and it's taking place in the house of Aries, which is Judea. And so they leave home and they travel to the capital of Judea, which is Jerusalem. And they go to King Herod and they say, we've come to see your son because he's going to do great things. And Herod's going, I don't have a newborn son. What are you talking about? And they explain what's happened. So that's when Herod calls the people, his scholars together, and who's this and where is it supposed to be? And they find the Messiah is supposed to be born in Bethlehem. And that's why the wise men get sent to Bethlehem. So it's sort of a pretty good explanation, but again, we don't know. However, if we're trying to figure out when Jesus was born, there was this planetary conjunction in the house of Aries in 6 BC, in the spring of 6 BC, which ties in with where we think, or when we think, Jesus might have been born. So who knows? The other interesting thing about the star and the wise men is the wise men weren't Jews. They were foreigners. So right from the beginning of Jesus's life is here's a message for Jews and non-Jews, for the whole world. Even more importantly, the wise men didn't follow Judaism. They probably were Persian and probably followers of Zoroastrianism. And so you've got people who are foreigners, and not only that, they're followers of another religion, and God reveals himself to them, and they come. So some things to think about today on Epiphany.